Well, good afternoon, Presbytery of Philadelphia. This is your Associate Presbyter, Reverend Greg Klimovitz. On this week's episode of Presby Speak, the podcast of our Presbytery, we continue in our series that we've been doing this fall called Conversations at the Well, reflecting on Christ's work through our faithful witness. And goodness, one of the joys and privileges of my ministry and the way that we get to collaborate in our presbytery is through the Ministry and Leadership Incubator that we have been in partnership with Princeton Theological Seminary for, I believe it's now its sixth year. So I'm joined here with our with the four of us, but three of our four seminarians that are serving in three of our congregations, and I'm going to have them introduce themselves now.
Hi everyone, I'm Beth Putney. I'm originally from Vancouver, Washington, which is right across the river from Portland, Oregon. And I'm serving East Falls Presbyterian Church in the East Falls neighborhood.
Oh yeah. Hi, my name is Eugene Chu. I call sunny California my home, specifically a suburb called La Cañada, and I currently serve at the Deep Run Presbyterian Church in Pennsylvania.
Rini, I'm going to have you go. You're going to have to hit *9. Or I think it's *6. There you go.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rini John. Right now, home is New Jersey, but before seminary, I hailed from Mumbai, India, and I am part of the Mount Airy Presbyterian Church family this year.
Great, and thank you for joining us via telephone too. And one of our other students is not able to join us today. His name is Carlos Acosta, and he is also serving alongside Eugene at Deep Run. And we're grateful for his work and witness as well among us. But Beth, I'm actually going to start with you. You sharing a bit about your context, and we'll have each one of you share just briefly where you are serving. So you are serving at East Falls. Can you tell us a little bit about where that church is located and its community that surrounds it?
Sure, yeah, East Falls is right on the Schuylkill and kind of surrounded by the Germantown area, and it's a pretty small community, very close-knit. People that I've been in contact with and talking to describe it as people, pretty much anyone or you have 1 degree separation from everyone in the neighborhood. And so people really value that about that space in that neighborhood, and they feel the same way about the church too. So that's pretty cool to get to be a part of, but yeah.
And I know this question is always an interesting one, because you all, if it wasn't for the pandemic, you would still only be a couple months into this ministry experience, but with the pandemic, you are not only early into the ministry, but so much of your experience is virtual and trying to understand the community. So Eugene, can you also share, you've been able to at least go to Deep Run. Can you share a little bit about your context too?
Yeah, Deep Run Church is on Perkasie. I'm not sure if I pronounced it.
Perkasie.
Oh, Perkasie, yeah. It's part of the county, and from the information that Reverend Chris gave us, Buckeye is the third biggest, the exact word it was, third biggest district.
It's a large county.
Yeah, but Deep Run is not so close to the most populated areas. Deep Run is more located in the rural the county. But even in the rural part of the county, there's a lot of families that are willing to travel to even come to Deep Run. And according to some of the information that Reverend Chris gave us, the demographic has a lot of young adult families. And actually, young adult families, there are more young adult families than I think it's the US average. Yeah.
It's one of the things that they've done a really good job at that church, sharing and at least engaging in their demographics. And they are actually a budding community when it comes to the young adult population. They're one of the younger communities within our presbytery in the greater Philadelphia region. So I'm glad to hear that as something that you've become aware of too. So Rini, if you could share a little bit about where you are as well. *9 again. Don't worry, I'll edit that out.
Okay, sorry. It's hard to know when I'm muted or not.
Just so you know, I've been muting you because I get some feedback. So just before you talk, just always hit *9.
Okay, I will. So I'm serving at Mount Airy, which is located, I think, in a transitioning community in that it's becoming more gentrified. The church itself has actually been in Mount Airy for over 100 years, which I think is pretty cool. It's a smaller church with an older population, but in many ways, it's a church that's very much about family and community and being there for one another.
Yeah, and it's definitely true, and we kind of know a little bit as a presbytery about that context because it's just down the road from where our office is located, and we've been able to see that neighborhood continually change. And with their new pastor there, Reverend Anna Grant Borden, she's been particularly sensitive and attuned to how that neighborhood and community has changed, and there's been a rebirth of energy in that congregation that we're really excited to see. So I'm actually going to kind of hang with you for a moment, actually, Rini, just to talk a little bit about this Ministry and Leadership Incubator, which is an intentional name that we developed when we first launched this program in partnership with Princeton, and it's become playfully known as an enriched field education opportunity. And so I just want to kind of ask you, when you hear the word incubation in relation to ministry and leadership, what comes to mind? In other words, what might make this for a helpful image for the program and ministry and leadership in general? Even more so, is there a theological connection you can make here? So yeah, what incubation, what's that mean to you?
Okay, so that's a big question. I think, when I first met you at PTS and heard about the incubator, the image that immediately came to mind was, oh, so this is like a chicken sitting on its egg, which is interesting to think about as a church doing that. But I think the idea, or if you think about it like a baby in the NICU using an incubator, and those images, both of them stayed with me because what this program and the community that I found here through the incubator program, it feels like a place where we have a safe environment in which to explore ministry, to try out new things, and I would argue also to fail, to be able to contribute now, but also to contribute in our future ministry work. So for me, the incubator program, as I think about it with ministry, I think it's an opportunity to grow leaders for the church. And in thinking about it, I think the Bible offers a lot of models. I mean, the easiest one that comes to mind is that of Jesus and the disciples, Jesus spending time with them, letting them go out into the field and try things out, the disciples doing well, but also failing and coming back, spending time with Jesus, and then going out again. For me, I think the biblical idea, though, when I think about incubator that's been more present in this time is the relationship between Elijah and Elisha. One of my favorite stories in the Bible is Elijah when he's just, had this really bad encounter with Ahab and Jezebel, and he's running and saying, God, I don't want this anymore. God comes to him and comforts him and offers him Elisha. And I can't help but think in this season of COVID, which is so unprecedented and so weird for honestly, I think everybody, I can't help but think that what we as seminarians offer is possibilities, just the Elisha companionship, just knowing someone is in there with you, but also the reverse side of that relationship with someone who's willing to invest in you and continue to grow you, your pastor, your church, the presbytery, you, Greg, to learn, to try out new things in what is still very much a life situation. Yeah, that's what I'm going with.
I'm going to officially put you, Rini, on our recruitment task force for the next round. That is beautiful. I love how you speak to the incubator from a lens that I actually haven't really thought about before, and that is referring it to the NICU. And how NICU is designed to care for some of the most fragile life. And so much of the church ministry can be fragility, but there is life there, but it requires tapping into additional resources and maybe other forms of caregiving and nurture that maybe the church has not explored before. But it's all about preserving this beautiful life that is there. And it's also about preserving a beautiful life in a new beginning. So I love that reference to incubation in terms of the NICU, which is definitely one that to be honest with you, I had not thought about before. So thanks for sharing that. Beth, if you can build on that a little bit, the same sort of question about how the incubator paradigm and image has been helpful for you, if it's been helpful for you indeed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Rini kind of touched a little bit on what I was thinking, which is, for me, incubator signals discipleship for me. I think that it's relational. It's not necessarily like program centered or programmatic, but it's how can we create new relationships, new kinds of belonging, new kinds of what we call community, what we call church, which I think that this program allows for, just kind of that imagining of how can we build these relationships. And I always think of things through a youth ministry lens, and thinking right now about our youngest generation, just they're called the loneliest generation. The most recent research that has come out, I think especially like Springtide, tells us a lot about like what we actually need, and what we need to be innovating is how to build significant relationships. And that's what the church should be doing, and should look like for the next generation. So
Absolutely, the relational side of ministry is critical, but yet at the same time, so often ministers go about ministry alone. One of the most consistent feedbacks that we get related to this program is how these pastors, who are solo pastors in their congregations, are most energized by finally having a colleague in ministry to bounce ideas off of. And that's been one of the gifts of this program. It's designed for small church solo pastors, is to provide that networking and that connectional side of ministry that can so quickly be lost, especially in these small church and solo pastor realities. So yeah, that's definitely a huge one. Eugene, can you build on that too?
Yeah, for me, when I hear the word incubation, I think of really something small being nurtured and grown into something more mature and big. And I know a lot of us are beginners in ministry, and I think this internship is really incubating us or helping us to become more mature leaders, and hopefully pastors that can really serve in the capacity that is required for the changing landscape that is really upon us right now. And so for me, the incubator, in short, I believe is really equipping us with guidance and coaching from these small little seeds to becoming trees in our future churches we choose to serve at, or whatever ministry roles we choose to do. So I think the image of the seed becoming a tree is really the picture that comes to mind when I think of the incubator program. And theologically, while it might not be like the most perfect connection, I can I could kind of connect it with the parable of the sower. I feel like if we don't have the right support, right training, right guidance, the right people to lean on, for a while, I think, yeah, we can grow, we could survive in ministry, but like the seeds in the shallow dirt, they don't really have much to lean on, and eventually they, wither away and shrink away. But I believe this program is really equipping us and really giving us the guidance. A lot of counseling going on, and I believe this incubator really has the potential to be that good soil. And through that, we can really take root and become, really, I don't want to say great leaders, but really well-equipped leaders, and leaders that are able to do what they need to do and really gain leadership.
And I love that all three of you are tapping into the metaphor of incubation that hinges on life. Like there is life there, and because these, especially the times in which we're in right now, they can be very despairing, and we can start to struggle and think, is there any life there? Is there any sense of possibility? And so we can usually begin conversations in ministry from a place of despair. But what you're reminding us is that it's all about cultivation, and it's about bringing that life to bear, and finding the ways the Spirit may do some of that watering within the community. It's been fun. Some of our earliest engagements with you all has been about capacity building and kind of flipping that leadership nurturing on its head and saying, no, start with assets, don't start with absence, right? Like, and so building that capacity, holding space. I love the framework and the term a capacious leader, which is what you all are, right? Is a capacious leader is one that holds space for possibilities, and the possibility being gospel bearing life, right? So Eugen, let's kind of hang with you two for a little bit as well. As we talk about capacity building and holding space to dream and imagine versus the often debilitating frameworks of scarcity and fear, you all are kind of thinking through how to push through constraints, even leverage them for the well-being of communities and neighbors. In relation to where you're serving, especially for you at Deep Run, and I'm aware that it's early on, where are you already seeing capacity being built as the Spirit moves in and through your congregations and surrounding neighborhoods?
For me, I've been really seeing like the value of family and really the delegation going on and throughout all the ministry. For me, that was really quite surprising. I think Reverend Chris really has put into our minds the importance of the body of Christ and how every single member has a role within the church, whether they have weaknesses or strengths. He has really shown humility in giving these delegations, giving away some of his, I don't want to say power, but giving away some roles to a lot of the deacons and elders and letting them really sit down and come together and really make these decisions, even though he might have the final say. It really is like a group effort, and he really uses every single member that is willing to really engage and really volunteer at the church to really give them a sense of role and sense of responsibility within the church. And that church is really family oriented, and like I mentioned before, there's a lot of young families all around Bucks County, and I think this ministry is really gearing itself towards focusing on those young families. There's a lot of things that a lot of ministries that are going on, such as this drive-in food pickup that they do once a month, and it's really all volunteers that really just come together and prepare food, prepare desserts, prepare everything. And Reverend Chris is there, but he's not, I don't want to say he's not really helping, but he's just overseeing it. He doesn't have any hand in it. And it was really just really inspirational for me to see just these members coming in, taking their own time off and preparing food and really just handing them out. At first, before COVID hit, it was like a dining hall. But now, since COVID hit, they're packing everything in bags, putting them in little containers, and they're having cars line up in like a drive-through, and they're literally just giving it away. And for me, that was really amazing to see. And yeah, they even have this I don't want to say daycare, it's a preschool. They have a preschool on campus, which is really helpful for the community as well. And for me, the aspect of family and the body of Christ is something that's really been imprinted on me, and something that I hope to, maybe take back to my home church as well.
Rookie move. Oh my gosh, I was muted. So I said, what about for you, Beth? I was wondering why you were looking at me strange.
I think for me, in the conversations that I've had, just learning about the community and learning about the congregation at East Falls, but maybe more just broadly in the community, it's made up of people who have been there for generations, like some people call Fallsers, and then there's been a big influx of like young professionals who can afford some of the housing in the area, starting families and things like that. but there aren't a whole lot of like family resources around because it's kind of always been like an old neighborhood, old established neighborhood, right? So I think something that they're starting to like engage with and figure out, oh, we need a playground in McMichael Park, like we need like these things for families to feel like this is a place for them. So somebody that I talked to, I asked this person, like, what's one dream you have for East Falls? And she said that people would stay. So you have this whole segment of the population that stayed for a long time and always stays. And you have this other segment that comes in, engages really well. There's a lot of young leaders on the elders and deacons board at East Falls Press, and they stay for a while and then they leave because they either outgrow their house or they outgrow like the potential for the community. So I think there's a lot of space there to think about, things that the community needs and that could be welcoming to those families that are coming and are there already. So.
Yeah, the transience of communities is really difficult, especially for churches within the city limits.
Yep.
As families, children usually grow up, a lot of times they will look for other educational opportunities.
Yep.
That are often the possibilities and perks of the privileged, and that continues to grow that gap that's there.
Yeah.
So this power of stay, I love that you use that for the Fallsers. And that community is definitely an important thing for them to kind of lean into. Mm-hmm. Rini, you're also another church within the city limits of Mount Airy. Where are you seeing capacity building happening and the opportunity for that congregation to build from a place of assets and life?
So I think similar to what Eugene shared, my experience at the church has been a lot of recognizing and leaning into the graces that are so abundant in this community already. I think oftentimes when we think about capacity building, or at least let me say for myself, you feel like you need to rush into something or if you're not doing like 6 things right away, that you're failing. So truthfully, in many ways, a place of possibility for, I think, our church community with capacity building has been the freedom and recognizing that it's 100% okay. And I would argue even makes God happy when we slow down, when we breathe, and when we think, and when we just trust that the Holy Spirit is moving. So in a lot of ways, capacity building, my experience with the church has been, what are small things that the Holy Spirit can use to do great things? So leaning into the strengths of the church. Mount Airy, that church family, they have such a heart both for other members within the family, but their community. So sort of building on that heart to get to know one another better, to recognize that we can't get together physically, but that doesn't mean we can't connect, pray for, and walk alongside one another in this journey. So one of the projects that we've been doing is looking at how can we really come to know what are the joys and the sorrows, the everyday life like for our community members. So we're doing this project, just talking and surveying our church community and friends of the church to see where they're at right now. How can the church come alongside them? Where are places where they wish to serve? And then again, similar to what Eugene shared, where our congregation is a mostly older community, and so they have very much a heart for seniors within the community. So we've been connecting with and looking to work with other NGOs in the community that are serving that population to see how we might come alongside them to maybe make food boxes available, but even just to be a resource for prayer or a connection and social interaction in a time where that is increasingly difficult.
I think all three of you are are nailing this question. Is I'm thinking about constraints. Like constraint can be something that can threaten the life out of something, right? And all three of you mentioned how that is a temptation in your community. It's like for you, Rainey, talking about the age of your congregation, Eugene talking about even like the fact that your congregation has been so much about hospitality in a particular place, like a dining hall. And for the Fallsers, this temptation to leave. These can all be constraints, but what it seems has happened for each of your congregations is that you're at the place under your pastoral leadership of each of your pastors to say, we're aware of that constraint, but how do we yes and that? Yes, this is the reality. And because folks are transitioning or leaving, what questions then can we be asking to provide that community of nurture? When we have been a congregation who has hosted like almost like a diner, and now we can't gather, how do we get that food out into the hands of these families, some who may be vulnerable and food insecure? And for your congregation that is an older congregation, instead of seeing the older generations as a constraint and saying no, they are bearers of the image of God too, how do we cultivate life in community and continue to learn alongside them and worship and engage in community with them and experience new partnerships through those other organizations in our neighborhood? That's all about that pivot of dreaming and discerning and designing and holding the space, that being a capacious leader. And I love how each one of you were able to nail that in your communities. And it's gonna be a gift in the year ahead as you kind of build in that space too. So that leads to a final question, though, is that so much of ministry is about asking the right questions. I even think about discipleship, right? And Jesus's ministry was not so much about being asked a question and given an answer, but so often Jesus was asked a question which led to a new question or another story or a riddle. And so ministry is about asking faithful questions, having that curiosity, that energy, intelligence, imagination, and love that's there. So here's the question that I am asking you is, what is one question that you're asking and exploring as it pertains to ministry, especially ministry in such a time as this? So I'll actually kind of linger with Rini a little bit. If you can start us off on that question.
So I think question that I was interested in, and actually what drew me to seminary, was this idea of the churches are spiritual families. And so when we automatically use the term family, you think the connections that you have with your parents or your siblings or your children. And so one of my questions that I have is, how do we create that family connectedness in our church communities, and then particularly at this time when we can't physically be with one another? I think that continues to be something that interests me, and I hope, well, let me say that I've been able to explore and examine, I think, with both Pastor Anna and the Mount Airy family.
What about for you, Eugene? What questions are you kind of leaning into and exploring right now?
For me, really, before I got into seminary, and as I was going to church, I would talk to a lot of younger folks, and a lot of them that weren't going to the school I was going, but people that I just knew, they kind of thought church was kind of oppressive and kind of almost even lame. And during my undergrad, I kind of learned that the Bible is a living word and not a dead word, meaning that the Bible really adapts to the social location and the time that it's being read at. So I was just, big question I have is, how can the church adapt to these current times? How can the church be relevant again and attract more young members and really be an institution that could really draw change and be an institution that really matters in this current time?
Beth, if you could bring it home.
Sure. I think the first question we have to ask is maybe Howard Thurman's question of, who in this community has their backs up against the wall? Who is struggling? Who is on the margins? And so I think if we approach it from that perspective, we'd see families who can't afford to stay within this neighborhood where they reach a certain point and they can no longer afford to be there. So how do we meet that need as a church community, as a neighborhood? What can we do? Is it as simple as a playground, or is it, fundraisers for the public school? Is it, I think there are a lot of possibilities that could incentivize family staying and speak to the needs of the people with their backs up against the wall.
Well, this episode has been worth every bit of the time that we've had together and more. I am so grateful for each of you and the insights you bring. One of the gifts that this program is that we get to learn alongside this next generation of leaders who are teaching us as much as we are seeking to invest in you all. Thank you for holding space for time today. To share with us your hearts and your faithful imaginations. Our prayers are with you. I'm so sad that we're doing this away from each other and only seeing you on these little squares and rectangles. But I know that we are still continuing to do the good work of Jesus Christ where God has called us. So thank you for this time together. Rini, thank you for joining us via phone, and go in peace.